here to tell me just how bad these sequester cuts are going to be for our military, Benjamin Smith is a former Navy SEAL and founder of the Warfighter Science, and Eric Davis is a former Navy SEAL, now with SOFREP.com. And I wish I was talking to you guys on better subject matter and Chris Kyle was still with us. I feel like the president should have said something about that, and he didn't.
I think he was lobbying gun control in Philadelphia that day.
All right, Eric, let me start with you since you're our remote guest. Ben and I were talking earlier when we were getting ready for the program, and as amazing as special operations are, if we don't have Navy ships and China does or Russia does, I mean, I have all the faith in you guys, but destroyers, battleships, you need battleships to fight battleships.
Yeah, we, when we start looking at cuts across the board in kind of a lazy, irresponsible, just blanket, hey, we're just going to start chopping money, chopping ships, we got to really dig deep as a country and ask what were those ships doing there in the first place? What were they there to take care of? What were the threats they were holding at bay? And did those threats go away? So if we're just going to start pulling out resources and pulling out things like battleships, we really, really got to slow down and take a look at what that's going to do to the protection of our country. And we have an obligation not only to ourselves here in America as a country, but we have an obligation to the entire planet to hold those threats at bay.
You know, we were talking about the Constitution. You know, you pointed to my Bastiat lithograph. Of all the things that this federal government does, raising and supporting armies and navies, providing for the common defense is an obligation of the federal government. Shrimps on treadmill, not so much. And it seems like the first thing that goes up on the table is the military, and including that $13 billion that Obama's moving out of TRICARE and into Obamacare and expecting veterans to pay more for their health care.
Yeah, and you've got social experiments, too. They have to follow orders, and whatever the governing administration wants to do to the military, they absolutely can, and they don't get to have anything because they don't have their 10 amendments. They don't get to complain or get a redress of their grievances and say, no, that's not right. That's why we're here. That's why when you get out of the military, you don't unsign your oath and you get your First Amendment back. So, I mean, just to set up the background on this, what is the world situation right now? We've got the Middle East. You've got the Arab Spring. You've got, which is Muslim Brotherhood. You've got the Syrian support now, which is Al-Qaeda. We're arming Egypt. That's Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda. You got Benghazi, you got North Korea with nuke testing, you've got Russia with $900 billion within the past 2 years into their navy. They're looking to put bases in Cuba, Vietnam, and they're flying their nuclear planes, piercing our defense veils. And now you've got China. They have super carriers in
and
testing.
Cyber warfare.
Yes, absolutely. And they're calling in our debts. We're giving them oil platforms off of South America. And this is just the background of what our world is today, and we're going to be going at the operations and maintenance account of the military. There's so many other expenditures that we can go at and get rid of all of these billions of dollars and still maintain a presence that can fight a two-front war.
Well, Eric, I mean, what about that? How do we have money to buy jets for the Egyptian Air Force, and we're cutting back on our own Air Force?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's an example of surplus spending. You know, I spend a lot of time working with, families and small businesses working inside of their world of finance, and we have a philosophy when we work with these groups or individuals that we'll start with protection first, and you never leave that. So it doesn't make sense whether we're talking about an entire country or we're talking about a business or a family. You don't worry about all these other things that could happen in the future, may happen in the future, if you don't first and foremost, protect yourself. So it's a perfect example of irresponsible spending, and it's an example of our government leading the way and leading people inside of our country to live well outside their means, right? We need to stop. There's a book called Stop Acting Rich, and that's what our government needs to do. We need to understand that we just can't go flippantly toss money here and there to, as Ben was saying, all these other programs and jeopardize our own safety, our own security, and not for selfish reasons. Of course, we always need to protect ourselves, but we can't leave ourselves vulnerable, because then we won't be effective or available to protect the other areas of the world, other countries that don't have the resources we do. So it's an obligation, both internally and externally, and we got to start with protection first.